The blue belt guy who was probably 150 jumped guard on a fellow who was probably around 200 pounds. And yeah, the guy was not ready for it. And his knee completely got destroyed. He was down on the floor for like a half an hour. I remember what he said to the guy who jumped. He was like, after he came to, he was like, "You're a dead man."
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tani to Delbra.
Hey guys, welcome to the Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan, the guy with the crazy hair. Remember, the Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu Jitsu. Today we are going to discuss the moves in Jiu Jitsu that you probably should never do. Before we do that, please like, share, subscribe. Check out the links in the bottom if you want to support the show. Really appreciate all of your support, and thanks for tuning in. So I'm going to discuss moves that you probably shouldn't do in jiu-jitsu. Some of these moves will be moves that you shouldn't do in the training room. Some of these moves are moves that you shouldn't do in the training room, but are very applicable to competition. And some are just moves that you shouldn't do at all, competition or in the training room. And also, I'm going to round out the end of the show with some realistic goals within your first 2 years of jiu-jitsu. So if you're a beginner, you're going to want to stick around for the end of the show. So first move we're going to discuss that you probably shouldn't do. Of course, I think this move, it's a little bit scary in competition where you're going against somebody who is known for this attack. And that's the flying scissor takedown, the Kani basami, which I believe Kani basami just means crab claw, if I'm not mistaken. You'll see guys like Gary Tonin and, God, who else throws Kani basamis? Little crazy fuckers like to throw Kani basami around. I know a couple guys locally who like to do it. It's one of those moves that is spectacular. Maybe one of the most classic, well-known finishes would be Rio Chonin doing a flying scissor takedown and then heel hooking Anderson Silva back in the Pride days. Of course, Gary Tonin has landed Kani basami in competition. He did an amazing one years back against Edwin Najmi, who is also known for flying attacks. Kani basami is a very surprising move. It can be a counter to a single leg, or it can just be a great way to enter your partner's legs from a standing position. I think in the training room, this move should absolutely be banned. If your gym allows Kani basami in open sparring, I would definitely have a conversation with your teammates and just say, hey man, like you got to take care of me when you're doing this move because it really is dangerous. But in competition, we've seen it be effective over and over again. But how can we train a move that we're not really supposed to be using in the training room? How can we use that move in competition and train for it to use it in competition? I think that this is a situation where drilling makes a lot of sense and practicing the movements of Kani basami make a lot of sense, and sort of seeing when you can use it and when you shouldn't use it. Also, as the defender, you always have to be aware when you're tying up with somebody under a rule set that allows Kani basami, you have to be aware that they could jump right into your leg and start attacking you. I'm not concerned about somebody entering the saddle on me and trying to heel hook me from there. In fact, I feel comfortable there, but I am concerned about uncontrolled falling body weight on my knee. And like I said, Gary Tonin is a guy who is spectacular in the standing position and the ground position, and actually has an instructional on, standing to ground and how you can lace your attacks within those two situations. It's called, what is it called? A shoot to kill, I believe. And it's an awesome instructional, but you don't see guys like Gordon Ryan using these techniques, or even like Nicky Ryan. A lot of these guys, I think, because they don't use them in the training room, they probably don't use those techniques in competition just because they don't practice them. But still, I feel like we do need to practice them at some point if it's a move that we plan on employing in competition. There's kind of two Kani basamis, the way that I look at it. There's type of Kani basami where you jump sideways into your partner's knee and without posting a hand on the mat. And this is obviously, I would say, the most dangerous form of Kani basami. And then there's another form of Kani basami where you are posting your hand on the mat. You're intentionally not trying to dive sideways into your partner's knee, but you're trying to take them backwards in a safe manner. The problem with Kani basami, as effective as it can be, is that you can't always dictate where your training partner or your opponent's leg will be planted or how they will be planted by the time that you leave the ground. So it's just like any move where you're falling on your partner. You could be very, very good at executing that move safely, but if your partner, doesn't react accordingly, then it could be a very, very difficult time. So for me, I don't really use Kani basamis ever. I would also feel horrible if I was going against somebody. I went for Kani basami and I blew his knee out just because I jumped on his knee. We've seen videos like this on Instagram all the time. It is a dangerous move. It's actually legal in wrestling. And even though it can be super effective, man, it's not safe. So I don't really like any techniques where I jump sideways into my partner's knee. That will segue into the next move. And it's not really a specific move, but it's just flying attacks in general. So flying triangles, flying arm bars. Generally, I would say flying arm bars and flying triangles are more dangerous for the attacker than the person being attacked. A couple of years ago, I think there was like a quintet, and we saw a European guy go for a flying arm bar. Get out of here. Go for a flying arm bar, and he spiked his head on the floor. And that can happen because the nature of a flying armbar is you're kind of going upside down and throwing your hips up, and you're leaving your feet. You don't really have a lot of control. Your partner could fall on you. You could just land the wrong way, which is what happened. And I think he damaged his neck. I don't think he suffered full paralysis, but probably never going to grapple again at the same level. And flying attacks, I'm totally guilty of this. I made my white belt career jumping guard and going for cross collar chokes because I realized from an early stage how effective close guard was. So I would jump close guard, and this is a common tactic you see nowadays that's very, very effective, especially in the gi. Because slams are not legal, why not just allow guard jumping and get to your close guard where your partner has no real offense from there. So I think flying upper body attacks like triangles and arm bars, it's not really necessarily dangerous for the person receiving the technique because that would mean that the attacker needs to jump so high that generally the defender's knees are pretty much safe, right? It's not like you can do a flying arm bar where you're jumping around your partner's knees. You have to get your hips up above their belt line and start isolating their head and arm. So they are spectacular though. And I also want to keep the spirit in, I want to keep the spirit of fight within sport jiu-jitsu and not just overly, take away all the dangers of it. It is still a martial art. It's a fighting art, and originally was a self-defense system to begin with. Not that you should be jumping guard in a self-defense situation, but generally I think flying attack should be totally banned in the training room. Again, any uncontrolled falling body weight is going to be dangerous kind of across the board. And what if you're jumping guard on somebody who's not ready for it? And now before you know it, you've broken your training partner's knee. This is actually something that I've seen twice back in the day when I was training. One time in particular, we were doing this exercise. I think it was a purple belt at the time. And we were basically lined up across the mat from other people. And then the professor would call out two names from the opposite sides. We'd come out and basically have a match in front of everyone, which is actually a super fun way to train. And it simulates real competition because everyone's looking at you. But unfortunately on this day, there was a gentleman I was a friend with. He was a blue belt, and another guy who was a white belt. This is back in the day when white belts were allowed to jump guard. The blue belt guy, who was probably 150, jumped guard on a fellow who was probably around 200 pounds. And yeah, the guy was not ready for it. And his knee completely got destroyed. He was down on the floor for like a half an hour. I remember what he said to the guy who jumped. He was like, after he came to, he was like, "You're a dead man." Which, when that kind of thing happens, it's like, well, it's not an illegal move. Technically, it was just, we didn't have the training, awareness to say, hey guys, don't jump guard on your teammates. And this is the type of thing that can happen. Like I've had somebody jump guard on me in competition before, and it wasn't like a clean guard jump around the hips. It was like this person was trying to jump just above my knees, and luckily I was in a good position. I was planted in such a way that my knees weren't damaged at all. But it was like, I remember when it happened, I was like, holy fuck, buddy. Like, you know, have some respect for your opponent. You know what I mean? Jumping around somebody's knees and without any regard for how you're going to land. It's just not something that I would do as a competitor or in the gym. And while I think that it is effective and I love seeing flying arm bars and triangles, I mean, there's not really much more of a move in jiu-jitsu that's more spectacular than that. But still, it's very, very risky in the training room. So you probably shouldn't do it. And like I had mentioned, there's risks to trying to execute that move. That being said, I know I've had the pleasure of knowing multiple people who are well known for their flying attacks. And I do see them here on the local level. You see them at the highest level, and it is kind of a thing of beauty. So take it for what it's worth. Flying attacks and guard jumps are also moves you probably shouldn't do. Definitely not in the training room. Save those for competition where you're fighting someone that you really don't give a fuck about. Okay, this is a move that you should never do. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's not effective. And you won't make a lot of friends in the training room. And that's driving your elbows into somebody's legs in the closed guard, or in any way driving your elbows into your partner's face, neck. You always see like white belts do this. And the reason that they're doing it is because they don't have the experience or the knowledge to escape somebody's guard effectively and properly. This cat, I swear to God, go away. So, driving elbows into the closed guard is very, very stupid and nobody's going to like it. Plus it's easy to counter. When you're driving your elbows into somebody's legs, you're trying to rely on pain as a method to relieve yourself from their guard. Usually they're just going to laugh at you. A lot of the time they're going to control your head and your wrist, and they're just going to triangle you. And eventually you'll learn for being such a stupid asshole. So don't drive your elbows into anybody in the closed guard. If you're in the closed guard and you drive your elbow into your partner's neck, it's not a hard thing for the guard player to shift your elbow across and start taking your back, right? And people usually learn this on their own because they get countered and then they realize, well, that won't work again. So don't drive your elbows into anybody in the closed guard like you're trying to Charlie horse them. It's just not how you're going to do it. Okay, here's another move that is actually totally legal. And I try to talk about it in the training room, especially for kids. I find that kids seem to use this a lot. Unfortunately, often kids will have success with this move and they will think, well, it worked. It's not illegal. Why wouldn't I do it? And there's logic to that. And that's the bear crawl out of the closed guard. So I'm sure you've probably had a teammate that's done this to you where they're inside your closed guard and then they just bear crawl right over your head, right? And it's pretty easy to counter. First of all, if they're going to bear crawl over you, their arms are extended. So technically, if you have good hips, you could fire your hips up into, jujigatames from the closed guard. Another thing you could just do is hold on to them and move with them so you don't get run over. But if you're not expecting this move and your head has nowhere to go, your partner's literally going to fold you in half and run over your spine. And I've seen this happen to kids, and then they cry and they come up to me and they're like, "He did this move, Coach Matt, that's not allowed." And I'm like, actually, little Billy, that move unfortunately is allowed. Let's bring everyone together and talk about how dangerous this is, because it can be effective. It's probably not going to be effective at any kind of high level, but for kids, man, this is a sport where in most competitions, you're not allowed to do guillotines when you're a kid. You're not allowed to pull down on the head when you're in a triangle. And now we're allowing kids to just like bear crawl over the other person's spine and fold them in half, right? So I always caution in kids class this technique, just because you might even have somebody who's brand new who just naturally thinks this is a good idea. I've seen it happen. And we want to be prepared for this because it is, I guess, something that can happen. It's not illegal, but it is dangerous. And also there's risks to doing it. Like I said, your arms are exposed to counterattacks. That's why you don't see the bear crawl escape out of the closed guard at any kind of high level. Okay, here's another move that's not a flying attack, but it's kind of like it falls under the realm of uncontrolled falling body weight, and that's tai otoshi. So really what tai otoshi is where, if you want to imagine like a body lock around your partner and then you fall sideways or you're attempting to trip them backwards, but you're kind of falling on your hip and taking them down. Now, why would somebody do tai otoshi? Obviously, it's a legit move in judo and it does work. That's the thing. Again, anytime you have a technique that where there's success, you're going to have students who pursue it, right? And I understand that, but I always ban Tai Otoshi in my training room, and so do so many other gyms, because it's uncontrolled falling, body weight. And again, if you could be very good at doing Tai Otoshi safely, but if you fall sideways into your partner's leg and they are planted wrong, you cannot really dictate where your partner plants their foot. And if you fall sideways into their knee, you will destroy their knee. It's very possible. Instead of doing that, why not just go into any number of mat returns or body lock takedowns? There's so many. Even a rear drop can be done safely as long as you're behind your partner's knees. Falling down, usually people will do a Tai Otoshi because they're not confident in returning someone to the floor from a body lock position. And so they just kind of like, out of fear or out of ignorance, they just keep their hands locked and they just fall backwards. But, if your partner's leg is in the way, you could be crushing their leg. So it's very important that I think you learn how to do proper. My cat's going to totally jump up in a second. I'm going to spray her. It's important that you learn proper mat returns from body lock takedowns, body lock situations. And the truth is that body lock is one of the most common jiu-jitsu attacking positions from the standing position. And it's one that we really need to spend a lot of time in, especially if your students are doing a lot of nogi grappling, or if they're going to participate in like ADCC grappling. We always try and get to body locks because they are so effective and you can chain so many different attacks from the body lock. I think it's important to just understand, how to trip someone from there safely, how to do a lifting mat return, and how to do like a sagging mat return. And if you have these options, you don't need Tai Otoshi, really. Even though it's a totally legit technique in judo, it can actually be a very beautiful move if it's done right. But man, there's so much risks associated to it. So I'm not a big fan of Tai Otoshi. Okay. Another move you probably shouldn't do jiu-jitsu, and this hurts me because it was the first throw that I learned in judo, and I do still fuck with it sometimes in the training room. And that's Seoi nage. A lot of people learn Seoi nage as their first turn throw. It's a move. It's a shoulder throw. In wrestling, they generally call it an arm spin, executed a little bit differently, but Seoi nage is like a classic judo attack. And of course, I would say it favors shorter guys as well, because you're getting underneath your partner. But if you look at a guy like Travis Stevens, who has a very upright Seoi nage, he's very good at Seoi nage. He's not the shortest guy ever. So it does work for all body types. But there's risks to it in jiu-jitsu. And, we'll just go over our basic discussion of the difference of the rules between jiu-jitsu and judo. In judo, if I throw a Seoi nage on you and you're chest to back on me, but I roll across your shoulders, I still win the match. Doesn't matter where what the next position is. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, if I do a Seoi nage on you, I'm not even guaranteed to get a score necessarily. I could throw you and then you're on my back and now you're choking me out. The fight just begins. So Seoi nage is not really a move that I think is super applicable to jiu-jitsu. Obviously, it works. Obviously, we see Seoi nage in jiu-jitsu, but any situation where you're putting your partner's chest on your back during the transition, there's obviously a risk. The goal is not to get a throw. The goal is to, get the person on the ground and then stay on top with control for 3 seconds after. So it doesn't have to be this big, beautiful Morote Seoi nage. Now, a Seoi nage that I do like for jiu-jitsu that I do think is quite applicable is it's known as the train wreck Seoi nage. Guys like Tim Spriggs and Rodolfo Vieira is very, very famous for using the train wreck Seoi nage in competition. And I like the train wreck because of the angle that you create. Your partner is not chest to back. Like, it's not that full turn throw where you get inside your partner's hips and you guys are both lined up facing the same direction, but more you're kind of side on. So it'd be very difficult for your partner to take your back off of the train wreck Seoi nage. And furthermore, usually it's set up with a snap down movement. And so your partner is, I think it's a beautiful throw when it's done right. In fact, when it's done right, a lot of the time your partner's head gets spiked right into the mat. But generally in a train wreck Seoi nage, your partner's getting yanked around and snapped down. And then as they're trying to recover their position off of the snap downs, that's when the train wreck happens. So I am a fan of the train wreck Seoi nage because I find it safe. And generally, anytime I'm trying to pick techniques, especially in the standing position for my game, I always will favor techniques that are simple, high reward, and low risk. And unfortunately, traditional Seoi nage is a high risk, high reward technique, which is why for me, it's not one of my go-to takedowns. If you're going to do throws in jiu-jitsu, I recommend you use like an underhook method rather than a classic Ippon Seoi where you come underneath your partner's arm and your back is exposed. If you do throws like ogoshis and power twists and even harai goshis and uchimatas with underhooks and even overhooks, your chances of getting your back taken are significantly decreased. Okay, this is a move that is nasty. Coyote guard. It's like a knee twist from the coyote guard, but not using the coyote guard as a sweeping position, using it as a submission. Thank God we don't see this happen too much. Coyote guard is or the lower leg shift half guard series. Like it's you have an underhook and you're twisting your partner's leg, made very famous by Lucas Leitch. This is one of the most common series from the half guard that everyone should learn. I think it's like probably the main series that everyone should focus on first when they're learning how to be offensive from the half guard and you're wrestling up from underhooks. But there's a move there where once you get into the coyote guard, your partner's knee is in incredible danger. And in the training room, we kind of keep our partner safe. Obviously I'm not going to hip in and crank my partner's knee. You're basically giving the top player a choice. Like, do you want to stay here on your knees and base out on top and I'll twist your knee off, or you can come with me and you can get swept, right? And if you avoid the sweep, then I can wrestle up. Like, that's kind of the little dilemma. It's like the choice you're giving the top player from the coyote guard. But we have seen people try to rip people's knees off in competition with this. I believe PJ Barch, who's like one of the top guys in the 10th Planet system. And obviously, if you follow competitive jiu-jitsu, you know who PJ Barch is. I believe he got his knee destroyed years ago and needed ACL reconstructive surgery because somebody put him in a lower leg shift from the half guard and basically just like exploded sideways into his knee. And when you do that, you're basically like any move where you're going against your opponent and you're saying like, I don't give a shit about your career or your well-being. I'm trying to win this match. And if it means you're getting in the hospital, I'm fine with that. And I'm not even going to give you a chance to tap. I kind of steer away from those. I don't find those attitudes to be too sportsmanlike. Even though I go in a match, I'm prepared to, break someone's leg, but I'm obviously going to give them a chance to tap. Otherwise, what are we practicing leg locks for, right? If you're not prepared to like break someone's leg, probably shouldn't even do joint locks at all. But, I'm always going to like give them a chance to tap, which is the sportsman thing to do. And I expect my opponents to do that for me as well. There's multiple times when we've seen guys rip heel hooks without any, warning. Like, what's that big fat guy's name from 10th Planet? Chris. I can't remember his last name, but yeah, just ripping heel hooks. Also Gianni Grippo, who's a legend, ripping that guy's, heel from the top position in the Emerald, what is it called? The Emerald City Invitational or whatever it was. I'm not even saying that those are bad things. It is competition and it's the highest level competition. So it is what it is. However, there's going to be situations where you almost try to trust your opponent to keep you safe and to try and win in a gentlemanly manner. And I believe that most people do that. Most people will give you a chance to tap, but man, like that coyote guard is a position where you won't feel in danger. And then all of a sudden they're ripping into the side of your knee with their hips and your knee could just be done. Right. And now you need ACL reconstructive surgery. I would never wish that upon any of my opponents, to be out for a year or maybe never even grapple the same again. Luckily, PJ's had surgery and he's come back full time and we can all enjoy how awesome he is at jiu-jitsu. But that's kind of a nasty way to win, in my opinion. And that knee twist from the coyote guard, I think the coyote guard is a absolutely fundamental system that we all need to have, but using it as a submission, I find dangerous and I find it distasteful personally. So I would say never use it in competition and never use it in the gym. Maybe if you're down points in ADCC and you're about to win, you're about to lose the worlds and you're in, you have the coyote guard, and I would still give my partner a chance to tap though. I don't think I would be hipping in as hard as I can trying to break the knee, but other than that, probably wouldn't use that ever as a submission. I always use it as a choice to let my partner sweep them. All right. Now another move that you shouldn't use, I believe you shouldn't use it in the gym or or in competition, but I know that some people disagree. And this is the lockdown used as a submission. So I love the lockdown as a half guard recovery position. I think it's fantastic. It's there was a time where nobody knew how to defend the lockdown. And so you would have guys throw themselves in a half guard and just immediately seek the lockdown. Nowadays, the way I look at the lockdown is it's like a last resort. Because there is a lack of framing going on from the lockdown, it really isn't an excellent distance management tool. However, when your partner's chest to chest on you and you need some kind of you need some kind of help to get out of that chest to chest half guard pinning, lockdown is often a great option. And again, I would never use it as a submission where I'm trying to explode and crank my partner's knee. That did happen recently to a UFC fighter, I believe at Masters Worlds, or would it have been Nogi Worlds? He was in the Masters division. Guy had a lockdown on him and he cranked the guy's knee, and it was actually called a DQ, I think. I think it was called a reap, which, you know, nobody ever thinks of the lockdown as a reap, but even the IBJJF doesn't know what a reap is. Are you reaping the guy's knee in the wrong way? Yeah, you are, but it's not what IBJJF classifies as a reap. And it's not talked about when we discuss what a reap is. But nonetheless, the lockdown, or the scorpion, as some people call it, is an incredibly effective tool. And I believe should absolutely be part of the game. And so should dismantling it be a part of your training. You know, go to the lockdown and play, do some basic leg pummeling, and find that's actually pretty easy to get out of if you know what to do. The way people get into trouble with lockdown is they get stuck in it, and then they keep trying to continue driving forward with their chest to chest passing, and then the person on the bottom, in a very, very violent way, extends their legs as hard as they can. And then that's when you'll blow your knee out, right? And it's a dangerous move for sure. But if you relax your legs and you kind of backtrack to the hips and you do a little bit of leg pummeling and free your leg, it's pretty safe. Okay. So, yeah, it can be dangerous. I don't think it should be used as a submission. Just like with the knee twist from Coyote, you shouldn't crank a lockdown on your partner. You should, you know, use it as a choice. Do you want to get swept or do you want to get subbed here? Why not just go with it? I guess IBJJF calls it a reap when the secondary leg is stuck. So there is lockdowns you can do when you have like an X guard on your partner. And so if you have that technique and you're extending them and they choose not to get swept, and you have the secondary leg controlled, you're in like an X guard with a lockdown on the far leg. If they tap, technically that's a DQ. As far as I understand it in IBJJF, which is why the IBJJF is absolutely ridiculous. You know, that person has the option to get swept. So yeah, my cat just attacked me again. This is what I go through, guys. Cat jumps on my lap. Cords come out of my goddamn microphone. Anyways, back at it. Yeah. Anytime where you're dealing with knees, maybe it's because I have a past of knee injuries. It gives me like PTSD, and it's something that I would recommend you steer clear of. You know, it's different from going for like a leg submission where your partner can see they're in a leg submission. They can see, okay, I should probably tap pretty soon. Okay, now it's time to tap. You put someone in a lockdown and you just start cranking their leg as a way to submit them. It is dangerous. And so we have to be very careful when we're getting caught in the lockdown, especially if you're a half guard passer like myself. Spend time in the lockdown and work your way out. I think, though, it is a move you should use as a sweeping move and as a recovery move, just not as a submission. Okay, calf cutters. I've talked about calf cutters in this podcast many times. I like calf cutters where your partner is out of base. Generally, these are positions where they're belly up. So like a truck situation where your partner can't run away. I think these are fantastic moves. Calf cutter can be very good. But calf slicer when your partner's in a sprinter stance, I've seen people break their knees before going for this move, attacking this move, and generally it can't really create a lot of finishing pressure when your partner has the ability to sprint away and extend their legs straight. So anytime my partner is in a sprinter stance and I go for a calf cutter, I basically just relieve my, I relinquish the calf cutter and I just come up on top and attack the turtle. I think it's the safest, highest percentage way to get to a finishing position. I don't really consider that a good finishing position. And like I said, if your partner extends their leg hard into you, all that pressure is going sideways into your knee. So take it for what it's worth, but I recommend not pursuing calf cutters while your partner's in base or in a sprinter stance. Always better when your partner can't run away. Even like the Lucas Barboza type calf slicer that we saw, which is a throwback to Sean Roberts from back in the day. He used to hit that knee, that calf cutter or knee crush or whatever you want to call it, from the front. As long as your partner can't run away and sprint away, pretty safe for you and dangerous for them. However, if your partner can sprint away and your knee is bent and you are hugging the hips and they can extend their leg, all that pressure will go sideways into your knee. And so I don't really think that is, as far as efficacy and safety, it's pretty low on the list for me as far as leg locks are concerned. Another move that you probably shouldn't do, again, I might get some hell from wrestlers for this. In the training room, definitely not. In competition, fill your boots, is suplexes. So suplexes are fantastic. They're super spectacular. If you watch a guy like Cody Steele, just love suplexing people. That's why when I fought him, I pulled guard because I was like, I do not want to end up on this guy's highlight reel. I've seen so many highlights where this guy suplexes guys off the mats or whatever and takes their back and strangles them. Like, I just don't want to be a part of that. So I'm just going to play my guard. And of course that didn't work out well for me. Still took my back, didn't finish me though, but didn't suplex me either. Suplexes can be done safely. Just be careful with who you're applying them to and the situation, because you will not make friends in the training room if you're doing tons of suplexes. I know they look cool and they're not even necessarily that hard to do. It's just, you never know when you're throwing a fucking 40-year-old father hobbyist around and, throwing them on their back and now they're injured forever and you're a fucking asshole for suplexing them. If you're in a high level competition, you're going to go to trials and you want to suplex someone, fine. Maybe you're a wrestler and that's part of your background. It is what it is. Just don't spike them on their goddamn head. And spiking in general, I know you're allowed to slam out of submissions in ADCC. I don't know. I'm on the fence about that, whether or not you should do it or whether or not it's even effective. If someone's on your back and you're the same size and they have a strangle and you drop them back, there's a good chance you're still getting finished. So I don't really know. I don't know how, if that's a move that people should do, slamming out of submissions. But at the end of the day, those are the rules and the rules allow for it. And I guess it does sort of keep that fighting spirit within the sport of grappling. So maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. Okay, the last thing is a move that you should do. And this is a move that I love, and you guys know that I love it, and that's the Roadhouse choke. I remember messaging Big Dan. I said, hey, do you ever use this Roadhouse grip? He's like, what's that? And I'm like, well, it's another word for the rape choke or whatever. And he's like, no, what the fuck is wrong with you? And I'm like, well, you made your whole career off of smother chokes where you're trying to drive your chest on the person. How is this any less classy, right? I actually find the Roadhouse way more effective than the smother. Another move is like the muffler. Should you do that in the gym? I think it depends who you're going with. If I'm going against a white belt female and I'm on her back, I'm probably not going to try and expose her neck by mufflering her and covering her nose and mouth, because it's just mean and it sends the wrong message to, a female who I'm probably wanted to keep her in the sport. I don't want her to leave because somebody tried to cover her breathing holes with my hands. However, I do have training partners who, we try and kick the shit out of each other, and we, we're great friends, and, I have no issues mufflering them, and I would expect the same from them to do it to me, because we're trying to prepare each other for competition. So I think that mufflers and roadhouses are pretty great across the board, as long as you're not doing them to, you got to pick your battles. If you're going against like a small woman or a white belt, you probably don't need to employ a muffler or a roadhouse. But other than that, it is not only is it hilarious and embarrassing, the roadhouse is very, very effective too. And when I started roadhousing people from mount, my mount game got way more effective. Like, I was able to control people for longer periods of time, and it would open up other attacks too. So big fan of those dirty moves. And guys, that's it for moves that you shouldn't do. And please, if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear them in the comments. Okay, now let's switch focus to the beginners who are listening to the episode. What should we focus on in our first 2 years of jiu-jitsu? What are our realistic goals? And this is a question that a listener messaged me, so I'm just addressing it. So from a technical standpoint, I think, you've probably already heard these answers before, but like guard maintenance and distance management, preventing your partner from grabbing your head, being able to recover frames, being able to reclaim the inside position and just manage the distance, preventing your partner from getting chest to chest on you, getting past your legs. These are all things that are like, I know what I said is like, it's a lifetime study of what I just said. Those are huge, vast topics, but generally, if you're in your first 2 years and you're going against people who are also in their first 2 years, you want to make competitive rounds and you want to prevent them from doing these things. Anytime that you're getting caught chest to chest, you made a mistake. Anytime your partner can control your head, you made a mistake. If you're having issues managing the distance with your frames, you're making mistakes. And so this may be one of the most important, if not the most important goals for the absolute beginner in jiu-jitsu, denying your opponent the ability to, affect the distance in such a way that you are now caught chest to chest or you're getting your guard passed or whatever. Another thing that I think like a realistic goal for a beginner is to be able to demonstrate the understanding of kazushi. Rather than just trying to do moves that you're learning, you have to know the music in between the notes, so to speak. So when someone's on top of you, you need to be able to off balance them. Got to be able to put their hands on the floor, got to make them stumble. This in the gi has to do a lot with how you're manipulating your grips, like your collar grips, how you're accenting your wrists and moving your partner's collars around. In no gi, a lot of the time, we're going to be playing like ashigarami style guards, which is a position that I believe even beginners should learn. Like for me in a no-gi situation, I believe ashi is probably the first position that I teach my no-gi students from an open guard scenario. But if you can't off balance anyone from a bottom position, you're never going to be effective. I don't care if you're trying to escape side control, if you have ashi on your partner, if you have delahiva, it really doesn't matter. Kazushi should be the foundation of your guard. Can build connections, create kazushi, and manage distance. So demonstrating kazushi, being able to use kazushi to set up sweeps and submissions, that's when you start to see a player become more intermediate. They go from absolute beginner to intermediate once they can do those things. Basic submission, application, and defense of the upper and lower body. So I'm not saying you need to be able to escape heel hooks, but as a beginner, you should know how to apply and defend a straight ankle lock. And I'm very adamant about that. I remember when I started, no beginners were using ankle locks. Now, when I go to a local tournament and I referee, I'm always seeing guys in the white belt divisions. They've unlocked the ankle lock and now they're using it against everybody and they're winning tournaments against people, sometimes against people that they shouldn't even beat. They're able to do it because they have a good ankle lock. So I don't care if you're a white belt beginner, you must understand how ankle locks work. Also, like I said, just basic submission, application, and defense. So got to start somewhere. There's so many submissions to choose from, but like basic strangles, headlocks, even for kids, because I know kids a lot of the time can't do headlocks, but it's such an important system for kids to learn. Obviously, triangle, Kimura, armbar, Americana, probably the first move you're going to learn from side control. Like all these moves there needs to be a basic understanding of how to escape and how to begin to apply them within your first 2 years. Pin escapes, I think it falls under the category of guard management, distance management, maintenance, right? Recovery. Pin escaping is such an important foundational skill for the jiu-jitsu beginner. So escaping side control, north, south, knee on belly, all the top pins, very, very important. Even rear mount, right? We got to know how to escape all these positions. You got to be able to be competitive with people your own size and skill, as I mentioned. And I would say basically the last expectation that I would have for a beginner would be grip fighting, right? Understanding that the engagement battle really does dictate who gets to do their techniques and who doesn't. And so if you're constantly losing the grip fight, you're going to be working yourself out of a lot of negative defensive cycles. So hand fighting from standing position, hand fighting from the guard, hand fighting while you're guard passing, hand fighting while you're attacking and defending the back. Pretty much every position in jiu-jitsu hand fighting applies to. And so I think that that's really important to also get your student playing hand fighting games and just get them focused on the task of winning the hand fight and getting to the grips so that they can implement whatever kind of game that they're trying to do. All right, other things aside from technical expectations, there's sort of some social or miscellaneous expectations as well. So first of all, try a couple different gyms. Don't just go to the first gym that's near you. Try to ask for a free trial, try a class, or I offer a week. So try to get as many trial classes as you can to get a feel for the gym and the culture there. You have to understand, like, what do I want out of training? If you want to get really, really good and you want to compete, or you just want to be very, very competent, then you should probably go to a gym that's full of high level guys. If you're just an absolute beginner recreational person and you have no aspirations of even being to a high level, like sometimes people, I've realized as a gym owner, there are people who literally want to be mediocre. And that's okay. I stopped trying to change their mind. Some people just want to come to the gym and they actually don't care if they're high level at all. They're just like, yeah, I just want to get a workout and learn a couple things. And like, I'm down to be mediocre. And it's like, okay, well, certain gyms will offer that culture and other gyms will not. So that's okay. Just make sure that whatever goal you have as a beginner, that your gym that you're going with, their culture and their mission aligns with your, your aspirations in the sport. You got to fit in and make friends. So it's just like when you're a kid on the playground and you're trying to fit in and not get bullied. There's not that you'll get bullied in jiu-jitsu schools. Most schools won't, but you have to sort of establish a hierarchy and understand where you fit on that hierarchy. Also understand that when you're trying to establish that hierarchy, it's a temporary hierarchy. Like the hierarchy is always changing, and where you are in the hierarchy now doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to be there, right? That's the great thing about jiu-jitsu is you start out as a white belt, and then as you improve, you start to move up the ladder, and you're like, oh, I can start to now, guys that I was having issues with before, I'm now taking it to them. I'm now starting to be successful against these people. And I'm even surpassing certain people that I never thought I would. And that's because everybody learns at a different rate. So you do have to fit in and kind of try to make friends, try and build relationships, because in a sport like jiu-jitsu where you could have like a drug dealer and a cop, and I've seen this happen, and you give them like a common goal, like study of jiu-jitsu, and a common struggle like jiu-jitsu has. And sometimes they'll be the best of friends, even though they're super unlikely friends to meet outside of the gym, because they have this common goal and passion within jiu-jitsu. They can get along really well. And that's a really cool thing about jiu-jitsu. So try to see where you fit in, if you have questions, that's good, but also know when you should shut up too. Like questioning your professor over and over again with what ifs in the middle of class is probably not the time to do it. Probably better to take them aside or ask some of the higher level training partners like, hey, I had this question here, and just sort of read the room, right? Those are all important things. Try to train with people from other gyms. So for me, I neglected this for a while because I was at a gym where there was kind of a isolationist culture, and you realize that actually the jiu-jitsu community is pretty cool, or at least in this city it is. And depending on the city you're in, the gyms might be more open or they might be more closed off. But if you can find other people from other gyms that you can train with, it will open all types of doors for you. You will gain access to not only different styles and different training partners, but a lot of these people do cool things for work too. And you can skill swap with them, right? Like you never know when you'll meet someone who is a good plumber or a good electrician. And then before you know it, you need something done and you can message them, and maybe they need something from you, and you can skill swap and really forge great relationships. So just like how you should try and fit in and make friends within your own school, you should also try and make friends and try and, learn who other people are in the jiu-jitsu community from other schools. Get to know your professor, because, would you want to do your apprenticeship under someone who's a piece of shit, or heaven forbid, like a rapist or a criminal? You probably want to know who this person is, both on and off the mats. Do they have credentials? Do they are their students good? You know, Danaher was recently on a podcast and he said like the measure of a coach isn't necessarily the titles of their top students, but it's their ability of, you know, the room as a whole. So how good is like the white and the blue belts in the room? That is an important test. Like, how good are the recreational guys in the room? If they're really, really good compared to other people of that rank, then that's probably a sign of a good instructor. So get to know your professor and, you know, everything about them on and off the mat. This cat, go. Almost done here. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry, you guys. And the last thing is, should you do a competition when you're in your first 2 years? Guys, I never force my students to do competitions. Everybody has their own purpose for doing jiu-jitsu. And for some people, they want to win competitions. Other people, it's the last thing they care about. I've talked to people that I know could win competitions. And I'm like, man, like, have you ever thought about competing? Like, I think you do really well. And they're like, yeah, I know. I just don't care. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that makes total sense. If you don't care, why should I care? Why should I care? You know, I don't believe that a martial artist's value or worth is judged by their competition results. It really has nothing to do with that person as a person. For some people, competition is their identity, and I think that's fine. But I also think it's fine if they don't want to do it too. So I always sort of throw the line out there, and I say, hey, have you ever thought about it? But I never say things like, well, you won't be getting promoted if you don't do a competition or anything like that. I think that's that's not really what my job is as an instructor. My job is to bring people together and to give them an opportunity to learn something cool and try and choke each other out, learn how to defend themselves and have fun and make friends. That's kind of my job in a nutshell. And if somebody wants to do competition, I think that's a decision completely for them. And if they want that, then, you know, I'll take it upon myself to help them get to that goal. All right, guys. So we just wrapped up the episode talking about moves you should not do, and also beginner expectations in jiu-jitsu. If you guys want to add anything, please comment below. I would love to hear if you guys have moves that you don't like or shouldn't be done in the gym or in competition or both. And also anything that beginners should know about, please, again, check out the comments in the bottom. If you want to support the show, please like, share, subscribe, comment, leave reviews where you can, subscribe to my online academy, buy my kids' book, all that good stuff. Really, really appreciate you guys checking out the show this week. And I'm going to see you guys next week. But remember, the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about jiu-jitsu. Take care. Peace.